I mean, we did it a little bit on Tuesday, but for your homework, you're gonna need to know how to write to a file. You're gonna need to know how to write to a file. So that's what I'm gonna go over today. I'm gonna do a recap. I'm gonna do a recap of like reading from a file. Not so much, but I'm gonna kind of do a small recap and then show you what we're keeping consistent when we write to files. Then I'm gonna get into like a bunch of examples of us like doing it together and seeing how we could take these larger problems and kind of break them down and see, all right, what's my input, what's my output. And then I want y'all to continue to work on that homework, cause yeah. Huh? You said cause what? All right, for the recap, this is gonna really be about input files. So remember when we created our object, with input files, we have three parts. The first part is the type. This is the type of file that we created. So I always have to have IF string, which stands for input file string. This means I'm about to read some input from a file. The second piece, this is where I name that object. Because deeper in my code, right, I want to be able to open a file, close it, read lines from it. So I'm going to name it. I have to name it so I can reference it. So normally with input files, we name it input file or input file. I don't really like file because once you start adding a bunch of input files and a bunch of output files, it becomes a little difficult to remember like what each object is like referring to. So maybe be descriptive in how you name your objects. And then lastly is the file that I'm trying to open. The whole objective is to open a file and read from it, right? So here's where I'm gonna specify what exact file I wanna read from. And it has to be as a string. Remember, this can be a string wrapped in quotes, or it can be a variable that has a string value that still refers to some file that you're trying to open. So when we go to actually read it, we always have to start with our if statement. We only want to open this file and start trying to read from it if it actually open, right? We don't want to try to read from an invalid file. So I'm going to start with my if statement. If this file is open, then set up some variables, then start using my technique to start reading line by line or character by character or value by value. I want to always start with the if statement. Then I go into creating my variables. Then I use my technique. Remember, the two techniques that we have are getLine. GetLine reads line by line. So if I want every line, one after another, I'm going to use getLine. And remember, getLine only works with strings. So if I'm dealing with numbers and I care for numbers even or odd or greater than or less than some value, I don't want to use getLine because it's not going to allow me to do that type of computation work. So I have to use my input operators in that case. Input operators takes everything by space and it stores it separate variables, just like CN would do. But remember, with my input operators, for every value I want to read in, I need a separate variable to store that value. So if I'm reading in 3 values per line and they numbers, I need 3 variables to store each of those numbers in. We following? So let's see. So for some more syntax. First, I always check if the file is open. Once I know it's open, then I can create some variables to start storing that data. So in this case, I'm assuming I'm about to open a file. The object is called file. It must have some names in it because I have this variable here called string name. So I'm gonna start reading these values line by line or value by value and storing them in this variable called name. How I could do that is with 2 different techniques. The 2 techniques I have could both work for this. The first one is getLine. If I want to use getLine in this case, it's going to read the entire line and store all of that in my variable called name. So no matter if it has spaces in it, let's say it was just 100 things of white space, it's going to store all that white space inside of that variable called name. and then it's gonna move to the next line and do it all over again. My other technique is using my input operators down here. This is gonna take the first characters that leads up to a space. It's gonna stop right there and put all of that in the variable called name. Since I didn't give it another variable, since I don't have any other variables, that's all it can really read. Then it's gonna go to the next value and go until it reaches a white space and store that in name. It's gonna keep doing that until it has no more values to read. So let's see output files. Same syntax pretty much, except we changing that I into an O. This just means go from doing input to doing output. So now I have OF string, which just means output file string. This is how I create an object for output file. Same thought process. And it's the same 3 parts that you would need for an input file. So I have my type, this is the type of object I'm creating. Then I have the name for it. So since this is an output file object, I'm gonna either name it output or output file. I'm gonna name it accordingly. Input files, I'm gonna name it input or input file. Output file, I'm gonna name it output or output file. Then lastly, I have the name of that file that I'm trying to send all of this output to. This is the file that all that output is gonna go to. And I think, like from my testing, that file that you put in there doesn't have to already exist. I think if it doesn't exist, it'll just create it for you and send the output there. So don't worry about seeing it in your file tree, but play around with it. I could definitely be wrong, but I haven't seen a case where it mattered if the file was there or not. So same syntax, we just flipping that I into an O for output. And normally when you create your objects for input and output files, I put them together at the top. So wherever I create my input file object, I create my output file right under it. I don't scatter them throughout my code. I keep them consistent. So the technique for output. What does output look like? So y'all told me last class, when we see this operator, this normally means what? What do we see on the left side of this normally? Cout, output. And on the right side, we see some value or maybe some variable, or even like ENDL for inline if we just want to output a new line. It's called our output operator. This just means do some output. The left side of this is how we want to do that output. This symbol right here is our output operator. That just means do the output. So again, output doesn't always have to mean output to the console or output to the screen where you normally see it like in ASM. That's not always going to be the case. In your homework, I'm not sure about the lab, but for sure in your homework, you're not going to really be outputting too much to the screen. You're outputting to a file. So let's see what that looks like. So instead of this cout, which is going to print it to the screen, I'm going to replace that with my output file stream object. If I put that OF stream object right here, whether I call it output or output file or whatever I named it, I'm going to put the name of it right there. It's going to send whatever value I have to that file. So instead of cout in your assignments, if the assignment says output it to a file, just like you can literally write it out how you would with cout, just replace cout with the output file object. That's all you change it. You got it? So let's see an example. I'm gonna walk through one example and then I got 2 more that I want us all to kind of work through. So let's see. I think last time we did the example with printing the even numbers. So this time, instead of printing the even numbers, I'm going to output them to a file.
Wait, didn't we already do something in Scratchpad 1, or did you just delete it?
Yeah, I reset all of mine. Just so I don't have like 10 scratch pads and this thing on the left look crazy. So if I want to do some output, I'm going to start with my include. And what's the thing that I need to include? F-string. All right. Then the prompt said I need to send I need to send data from a file. So I know I need my input file. And it says send some of that data to an output file. So I'm gonna do OF stream.
Wait. Question.
Yo,
Should the input file does it need to be does the F need to be capitalized if you're using camel case?
good point. Good point. All right. So if we go back, the input file is supposed to be called my_file.txt. So I'm gonna put that in here. And then my output file, let's say I want to send it to a file called evensonly.txt. So right now, let's say I want to start reading from my file. What's the first thing I need to have in here?
If
If
they're open.
if the input file is open, let's say right now I want to see out file is open.
So it is open, just works on every file?
Yeah.
Okay.
So right now I'm just trying to see if my file is successfully opening before I do anything. So I check if the file is open and it didn't print anything.
So you need to create it, right?
Oh, okay. My file.txt. Alright, so I'm gonna paste all the numbers in there and let's try to run this again. So now I get my output file is open. So remember, once we know the file is open, that's when we can start actually playing around with the input and start sending it to this output file. So remember the first step, going back to the slides. First step, after we open the file, or after we know that it's open, is to create some variables for it, for our input. Since these are numbers and we care about their actual numeric value, we're going to use integers. And I'm going to call each integer that I get to, I'm going to call it n. In order to read an integer as an actual int, I need to use the input operators. So what needs to go on the left side and the right side of my input operators?
The file name and then the variable.
Appreciate it. Like this.
Yeah.
And so that's, what is that doing?
He's reading
Read one
each
itself.
line. He's reading each line of that file, right?
Reading each line of this.
Yeah.
So the first time is 1, then 2, then 3, then 4.
Yeah.
Bet. All right, sounds fine to me. So if I read in every value, remember it said take only the even numbers and send the even numbers to the output file. So I'm gonna check if in mod 2, I'm gonna check if n is even. If it is even, I'm gonna send it to my output file.
Do we need to check if that's open too? The output one?
So with output files, I'm gonna say no. I haven't seen the case where like it mattered, because if this doesn't exist, like looking at my file tree, I don't have a file called evens only, right?
Yeah.
But when I run this code, this file gets created for me. So I don't think it really matters if it's open or not, because if it's not open, it's just gonna get created.
So as long as
And so after my while loop, remember I have to close my files. So I'm gonna do input file dot close, and I'm gonna do output file dot close. So remember, I create both of these objects together. They get open together. And so when I close one, I'm gonna close the other one. Cause once I'm done reading from my input file, I'm also done writing to my output file. So let's see what we get in this case. So we get our file evens only, and it consists of only our even numbers. Anything confusing about this piece? Any questions? All right, let's see another example. I knew he's about to. What's up, though?
Oh, you said don't forget to close the file.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to throw an error, but it's common practice. Yeah, once you're done reading from the file, once you're done reading this while loop button, then you close your file.
And it basically makes it to where anything else can be inside of it, basically, I guess.
Yeah, it's basically just telling the program I'm done reading from this file and I'm done writing to this file. If you want to continue down here, you gotta reopen it. Dot open.
Wait.
Is open tells you if it's open. Dot open means open it. So some takeaways. Instead of using cout, notice we didn't use cout at all in that program. Everything was supposed to be sent to the output file. That's why we didn't see anything print out in the console. All our output went to the output file. Second takeaway, if we wanted to print stuff, like let's say you wanted to print it and send it to the output file, we could just have two statements, one doing the cout, the one after it is the one sending it to the output file. We can always mix and match depending on what our use case is. Questions?
So like, we have to make our own file.
For what exactly?
I mean, just, well, I'll ask later.
All right. And then don't forget to close your files at the end. So let's say we have this example. So we got this example. It says create a program that prompts a user to enter some names until the user enters the word stop. Once they enter stop, the whole thing should stop. Each name that they enter should be written to some output file called friends.txt. So we prompted a user for names until they enter some that has a value of stop. Then we want to stop our program. But every time they enter the new name, we sent that name to the output file. So now we kind of combining a whole bunch of concepts in one. Do we have any ideas though? Anything come to mind? Kinda?
Yeah.
Got it? I bet. So I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna go into the other scratch pad and see what we got. So our prompt says create the program that prompts a user to enter a name. So what I'm gonna do is take it step by step. I'm not gonna try to solve the whole thing at one time. I'm gonna go with what I know and then figure out, all right, where am I getting lost at? So do we know how to create a program that prompts a user to enter names until they enter the word stop?
Yeah.
We know how to do that? All right, so how do we do that piece? Don't worry about the input file and output file, just
Just like
see out. Okay, so I guess we don't need that. And then what?
oh shit, we didn't do a string.
Yeah, string name, get line, CN, name.
All right, so that reads the name. And so we want to keep prompting them for more until they enter the word stop. So how we do that piece?
That'll be a while loop, right?
A while loop, because we don't know how many times it's going to take them to enter that. So while
So while name does not equal stop.
yeah. So while they haven't told us to stop, we want to do what?
Keep on going.
Basically the same thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, pretty much.
We want to prompt them for another one, and then we want to save it and name. So this thing should keep running until we enter stop. So let's see if it works. So enter a name. All right. So we got the first piece down. So remember, when I see something like this, I don't tackle the whole thing at one time. I tackle piece by piece, and then I run my code to make sure, all right, at each significant piece, it still works. Versus typing 20, 30, 40 lines, and it doesn't work. Then you just kind of like confuse yourself, right? So let's see. This next piece is, and this is kind of like the new concept, right? Each time we should write the name to a file titled friends.txt. So how could we do that? If we want to start doing some output, right? What do we need to do that?
We need to put the if statement above the while statement, right? To like check if the first thing you created, right?
Yeah,
So like,
OF string. And so if I want to use OF string, where does that come from?
Don't you have to include F string?
Include F string. So I'm gonna say OF string. Let's say I'm gonna call it output. And it says send this to a file called friends.txt. So remember, just to show you, like for this example, I'm gonna create a string called file FN, which stands for file name, and I'm gonna have a value of friends.txt. So I'm gonna just put FN in here. Are we following? Instead of just hard coding the text in here, I created a variable for it, and I put that variable in there. It's gonna do the same exact job. I'm doing that because technically we could prompt the user for the name of the file to send it to. If we wanted to, we could say, tell me what the file name should be to send all of these friend names to. So it's not gonna always be you knowing exactly, you know what I'm saying, what the file name should be. So in those cases, just understand this can be a string, literal, or it can be a variable with a string value. All right. So now that we have our output file object, we can use that object to start writing data to it, right? So we need to do this every time they enter a name. So we get our initial name. So do we want to off rip just send that name to the output file? Because what if they just entered? What if they entered STOP? That's going to be what we get on line 19. We don't necessarily want to send that to the output file if they enter stop as the first thing. So then we need to check it. So I'm going to say if name does not equal stop, then I can send it to the output file, right? So what do I need right here to send it to the output file? Like that? Output. Remember, I'm using the name from the object. The name from the object is what I'm using. I know it might be tempting to say put friends.txt right there because that's where you want to send it to, but nah, this is literally just a string. C++ is going to say I can't send it to a string. So I got to send it to the output file. So let's see if I enter a valid name as the first name. Let's see if it sends it to the output file. So the first name that I entered was valid, and then I entered stop, and so it stops. And I got my name in the output file. So now we just need to handle the rest of these names, right? Because they could enter 100, 1,000 names. We want to write all of them to the output file. So what do I need to add now? Repeat that step. Do I need all of this? How do Babe, bro.
I'm sorry, I blinked out.
So how we finish it up? Right now, if they enter an initial name and it doesn't equal stop, we send it to the output file. So down here, this is our loop that's gonna continually like ask them for more names. So what do we need to change about this to add every valid name to the output file?
We change get. Should we change get line to the output?
So get line is what's accepting the new
Right,
name.
accepting the
Yeah,
name.
they could put stop.
Okay.
If they true. So what should we do?
Technically, you just have to put the if statement again.
So put all this in there. Like at the bottom. Like this.
Like,
I think this will work. I think there's a way we could shuffle it to make it less redundant, because like we have the same exact condition right here, right?
Right.
So I think there's a way we can shuffle it, but logically following it, it's gonna say, all right, come into this loop while they didn't enter the word that should break us out of the program, right? If they haven't entered anything to make us stop, let them enter a name. Let's save that name. At this point, they could actually enter stop, so we don't necessarily want to just throw the name in the output file. We have to check it. So we're gonna check if what they just entered is stop. If it's not, then we can add it to the output file. So I think this should work. But like I said, I think it's a way we could maybe shuffle it and make it less redundant. So let's see. If I enter I don't know. And then I enter stop. Boom. I got all my names in my output file. Any questions on any of this?
So what's the way to make it?
You know, how would you shorten
Yeah.
Make it less redundant?
Would you put it outside the bracket?
Oh,
Do you even need
would you just turn it into a function?
I mean, that still would be like, it still would be redundant. It just would be like,
Well, I mean,
the redundant piece would just exist somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? But that's a good thought, though. What's up?
isn't the like if statement or all statement check it for like the same thing?
Yeah.
Couldn't you just put it like right after the get line, or is that?
So if the problem is, if I just do this, remember they could enter stop right here. So we don't necessarily want to send stop to the output file, right?
Oh.
Because it's not going to catch it until it gets back to the top of the loop.
Alright.
So maybe, I'm trying to think, nothing really like jumps out at me, because even if we put that at the top, maybe that actually would work though. Let's see what happens if we just do this. I think it's going to write the first name to the file twice, actually. Yeah. So we made it less redundant, but we made the send to the other file, we made that part redundant. So I think maybe that if statement that we have is probably like the best we could do right now. Unless we change this to a different type of loop. So maybe let's just keep this as this. So let's say we did want to make it a function, right? How could we do that? I like that idea. Let's say I'm gonna give you the header for the function. So let's say I want to just say if huh?
If str up there.
Okay, if str equals stop, what I'm gonna do? Return true, and then what goes down here?
But you could just go to the next. Oh, return false.
Yeah, return false.
And this is another way I could have written it. I could just write return str equals stop. Because remember, that's gonna tell me true or false. But I'm gonna leave this here because this is right. So if I enter some string in here, it's gonna tell me if that string has a value of stop. So I can say while they haven't entered stop, allow them to keep entering names. And then I'm gonna check the same thing down here. And I guess the same thing up here. But see how we like doing the same exact condition like 3 times? Like there's really a better way we could have like did it, but it's fine. But let's see if this final solution like actually works. So I'm gonna enter the names. All right. So we cleaned it up a little bit, but yeah, we still get the same behavior. Any questions on this before I move on to the next example? All right. So let's see this other one. So this challenge says we have a file, an input file, I guess, that's called cities.txt. It has a list of US cities inside of it. We also have another file called temps.txt. That file, on each line, it contains a temperature for, I guess, the US city that's in this file. So on the first line, it has, let's say, Houston. The second file has the temperature for Houston. We want to write some output. We want to write output to another file called weather_reports.txt. You know, each line is going to say it is currently blank temperature in blank city. So we got to read from both files and send some new message to an output file.
So the two at the top are input files?
Yep. The two at the top input files, the one at the bottom is going to be what our output file should look like.
Okay.
Sound easy? So this is an example of what your data might look like, right? Say we got Dallas, Texas. So we want to read this whole thing. Read this whole thing. So read the first line of this, read the first line of that.
Okay.
Infuse them and output it into a new file.
I can see it. I can see it.
Getting the vision a little bit.
Yep.
I can see it.
I can see it. I can see it.
All right, bet. Let's see what we got.
He sees the vision.
Because like for the first one, right, you would use getLine to account for the spaces, and for the second one,
Mhm.
you would use the regular file reader, so you could just read the thing as is.
Okay.
You would assign them to variables, and then you would then write a cout statement where you just like do both, because we're not changing or altering the variables in any way, shape, or form.
All right, bet.
At least
All right.
that's what makes sense to me. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Sound good. Let's see what we got.
And then put it in the output file. And that's all that.
All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create those input files so we got some valid data to work with. So these are my cities, and I put these slides on AirStem today. So like, if you want to create those files, you don't have to like,
Type them out.
yeah. So temps.txt and cities.txt. All right, we got our data. Now I'm gonna start with the obvious. I need fstring. And so what objects do I need? Because remember, this time I'm reading from 2 files and I'm writing to 1 file.
Start with your IF streams.
IF stream. There we go.
Cities, and then one for the temps.
Another one for temperatures. All right. Now what? Check and see if they open.
Well, don't we need to set up the output one?
Right. We need another one for our output file. And what are we calling this one?
Weather
Weather
reports.
All right. Cool.
Oh, wait, you gotta change the. Does the name
Oh, okay.
matter?
Yeah, because it's just like creating a variable, right? You
Oh,
can't like.
Weather report.
All right. Weather underscore reports or. All right. So like you said, we're gonna check if they open, right? So if cities that is open,
Can you put an could you do an and to include them both, or does
Yep.
it need to only be one?
now we need to know, because remember, if we type, if cities open but the other one didn't open, we shouldn't, we shouldn't do
I
anything.
was saying in the sense of like you have to do 2 separate ones on each of them.
Oh, nah, we wanna read them concurrently, right? Because when we read Dallas, we don't want to move on to Williamsburg until we get the weather for Dallas, because we want to send them in pairs to the output file.
I get you.
So if both of them open, then we want to do what exactly?
Create your variables
Create my variable. So from cities, I'm reading in a what?
string.
A string. And I'm gonna say city. And from temps, I'm reading in a what? A double. I'm gonna call that temp. So now that I have my variables, I can start reading in those values, right? So I need some type of technique in here that can read in values. You said get line. So while get line what? Cities. So what am I reading? This I'm reading in a city and I'm storing it where? City. So this is going to tell me if I can successfully read in a city. I also got to check what? The temperature. So I'm going to say and how am I going to read in the temperature?
Couldn't you just do this one 5? No. Yeah, 5 right now.
He doesn't input one because it's not.
Temps,
You don't need no C. Yes.
right. Temps is where it's coming from, and temp is where I'm storing it. So again, this means while I can read in a city from cities, and I can read in a temperature from temps. Because remember, I need to do both. If one of them fails, I shouldn't try to, because I need both of those values to write them to the output file.
Could you do the comma with temp also?
Nah, temps is like a double, and get line is like a
Right.
string.
You talking about right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, nah, only if it's the same type.
Can you explain the temp part?
Yeah, so remember, let's say I wanted to read in a value from a user. I would do cin.
Yeah.
I would do cin and then the variable I'm reading it into.
Yeah.
In this case, we're reading it from a file object. Our file object is called temps.
Okay.
It's just they name so similarly. It's like, yo, which one is?
I got you.
But this is like some stuff you're gonna see in industry, bro. Like the S is gonna make such a it's gonna make such a difference, and it's like because they just expect you to follow along with it. So while I can do both of those operations, I want to do what? Output.
Weather report.
Okay, weather reports. And what am I doing with this?
City and temp, or well, should you set the statement for it, or
You gotta put your line, your arrows.
Like this?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I like that.
Nah. Other way. I'm reading this data into the weather reports. And so remember the format is currently blank degrees in blank city. So I need to do what? Also type those. Where do I type them at?
You can start right there. And
It's currently city. It's currently what?
It's
Huh?
currently 10.
Oh, it's currently temp.
Yeah.
and
I'm gonna put the. Can I get that? Oh, damn. There we go.
how do you even get that?
Option 0.
Okay.
Hold option, press 0. It's currently blank degrees in city. Inline. So I can do inline with when I'm output into a file.
I don't think you can. I think you should just leave it as.
So if I don't put inline, it's gonna just chain them together, right, on one line.
Oh,
So yeah, I can do it inline with output files as well.
Did you have the Texas?
How'd you get that little?
So-
Oh, wait, never mind.
Yeah.
Because that's not close to
Yeah. So do we think this should work? And remember that last step is to do what? So I gotta close all these files.
Wait,
Huh?
you can just put city right there?
Because remember, cities is the name of the object.
No, I'm talking about in the
Right here? Yeah, because remember, that's the variable we created that's going to hold every city.
Yeah, but you could do that without the little thing.
Oh, my bad. No. I'm like, nah, we needed that. Good catch. What's up, bro? All right, so we think this should work? All right, let's see.
looking good.
We just wrote all of that. We ain't check nothing. So let's see. So we get. Oh, okay. I forgot my semicolon. All right, so we got it, but it printed out my symbol a little weird, so we could just remove that because I didn't know it was gonna do that. All right, let's see. Boom. It's currently. We did. Them the whoops. Them the whoops. All right. Any questions on how we did any of that? Why we did it like that or that? Any questions? We got it.
That makes sense.
No, because like I did James one how we were supposed to work. I got it right.
No, I did not.
Are we good? Facts. That's not a valid response.
she's like, true or false? I needed a string, bro.
Yeah, question. It makes sense because it'll read a lot better than
Send it to her, see what she thinks.
I'll show you like I'll show you. But like try to look at it again. We good? Not really.
Y'all still coming.
You started it? You started it?
I mean, I did, but then it was being weird because you know, like the numbers one, I did.
What's wrong with it?
No, I kind of. It's not because you literally did the exact same thing,
People always say this.
Oh, I was waiting for it. I was literally waiting for it. I was waiting
bro.
for it.
But it, when mine started marking,
Did it tell you the print? What is the question telling you to do?
I ain't got no idea.
I was waiting for it.
It says if the current value is even printed out, you send it to an output file. See, now you send it to an output file. So the output file got all the numbers. I'm checking the console for the numbers and the whoop's not right there.
no.
You get what I'm saying though?
I said I copied it by heart. I said I wasn't lying.
Alright, we good to move on? Alright, bet. So really the rest of this time about to just be like y'all homework or Wordle and stuff, cause today is the last day for Wordle. The Wordle code is due today, 11:59 today.
Why you?
Cause I'm trying to make sure. Yeah, I got it.
Wait,
The Wordle code.
the meeting with the TAs and stuff?
You don't have to worry about if we do that. I'll announce when that's gonna be, but just lock in on finishing that code today. Work on it right now. Work on it whenever you find time, because it's due today at 11:59. All you need to worry about is getting.
Let's go from the doc into your code.
Yeah, if you can at least transfer stuff from the doc into your code, you probably more than halfway there. So what I'm looking for is this thing to have a check mark on it. Wordle game. I'm gonna go through. See the check marks. If you have a partner, I would prefer if you and your partner can both get the check mark. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to do my research and figure out who partnered with who didn't submit the doc with the partner name. And just try to, if your partner got it complete, copy it from your partner, please.
Wordle?
I feel like there should be no reason to not get it. I'm still here. Today you got the TA. I'm here. Don't take that much on a project.
What do you mean? I'm doing this.
But if it comes down to it, yeah, I'll examine it, see how much you did.
That's what they
I'd rather
say.
do the project.
That's what the project is. They gave us these. They gave us a bunch of them.
All right, any questions for me? Questions about Wordle? Questions about the homework, lab, anything?
Wait, what was for the Wordle project? We're supposed to use the function as right?
It would probably make your code way more concise. You didn't have to. If you ain't want them, you could delete them, but
Are you being good?
Yes.
you didn't have to use these. It say optional.
Nigga. Oh, see, that's how I know. That's how I know.
What's optional?
Y'all didn't even read
These functions were optional.
I thought I deleted something on accident. And I thought like, oh.
It's in big.
Yeah, I'm about to say y'all gotta read comments and code.
I read it.
Listen, I
thought
was
it
the
wasn't
exact.
function.
Listen.
I
Alright,
didn't- I
I was the
really thought this
exact
was
same, but
Oh.
That James Harden meme. But nah, yeah, these were just so when you go down here to write your code, you can plug these functions in because these are like repeated steps. You're repeating them over and over again in the Wordle game. So instead of copying and pasting your code over and over again, that's the whole point of a function in general, right? So, huh?
You gonna look at my shit?
It's repeated. I don't know. You want to write code that like people want to be able to read, right? Like you don't want to. You the only person who wants to read it. So be nice and write it with intent. All right, we good? No questions? All right, bet.